Hello, and welcome to Echoes of History Vault. I'm Nipu, and I'm honored to be your guide as we step gently into the forgotten worlds of the past. Here, history isn't rushed. Every story unfolds slowly, inviting you to wander through ancient cities, quiet villages, lost kingdoms, and the everyday lives of people who lived centuries ago. Whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or simply enjoy the timeless stories of our world, you've found the perfect place. So, settle into a comfortable spot, dim the lights, and let the noise of today fade away. Take a slow, deep breath. Close your eyes if you'd like, and allow the echoes of history to carry you on tonight's peaceful journey. If you enjoy these relaxing historical stories, consider subscribing to Echoes of History Vault so you never miss another journey into the past. Now, let the story begin. Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something historians secretly love and professors politely call counterfactual history. In plain English, we're asking one giant question. What if the Roman Empire simply never fell? So dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe fluff the pillow that has somehow become flatter than an ancient Roman coin, and let your thoughts drift with us through a version of history that never happened, but almost feels like it could have. As always, this isn't about battles exploding every 5 minutes or dramatic movie speeches delivered in perfect Latin. Tonight, we're moving slowly. We're following ordinary people as much as emperors. We'll wander through marble streets, dusty farms, candle-lit libraries, and surprisingly bureaucratic government offices. Because if there's one thing Rome truly loved, it wasn't conquering people. It was paperwork. An empire that could organize grain deliveries across 3 continents was absolutely capable of creating forms in triplicate. And honestly, that might have been its greatest superpower. So close your eyes if you'd like, take a slow breath, and let's step into a world where the year 476 never became famous. Because in this version of history, Rome simply keeps going. Most history books love dramatic endings. The last emperor, the final battle, the empire collapses. Curtains close, credits roll. Reality, however, is much less cinematic. Empires don't usually wake up one Tuesday and decide today's a great day to disappear. They shrink, they adapt, they argue, they tax everyone a little more, then they argue about taxes. The Western Roman Empire didn't explode overnight. It slowly became weaker over generations, until one Germanic commander removed a teenage emperor named Romulus Augustulus from the throne. Ironically, Romulus carried the name of Rome's legendary founder. It's a little like the last president of a country being named Mr. Constitution. History occasionally has an odd sense of humor. But what if that moment never happened? Let's imagine something surprisingly small changes. Not magic, not dragons, not time travelers carrying assault rifles, just competent leadership. It's amazing how often history can pivot on that. Perhaps Emperor Majorian survives longer. Perhaps his military reforms continue. Perhaps corrupt officials stop sabotaging every capable general they meet. That alone would already improve Rome's chances considerably. The empire still has problems, huge ones. Its borders stretch thousands of kilometers. Money is tight. The army needs constant funding. Political assassinations have become something close to an unpleasant national hobby. But none of these problems are actually impossible to solve. Especially because the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call the Byzantine Empire today, is still wealthy, still organized, still Roman. People living there certainly considered themselves Roman. If Constantinople decides that losing the western half would be a terrible investment, perhaps it sends more soldiers, more engineers, more administrators, more money. Not because of sentiment, because accountants have calculated that keeping Italy stable is cheaper than cleaning up after its collapse. Roman accountants were rarely exciting people, but they occasionally changed history. Imagine waking up in Rome around the year 500. The city isn't quite as magnificent as it was during Augustus. Nothing stays at its absolute peak forever, but it's alive. Markets open before sunrise. Fresh bread fills the streets with warm smells. Merchants shout prices that somehow become louder despite everyone speaking Latin. Children chase dogs. Dogs chase chickens. Nobody knows why. Some traditions simply survive every civilization. The aqueducts still work. Water flows across enormous stone arches built centuries earlier. Public baths remain open. Not every neighborhood is wealthy. Not every building shines with marble. Yet Rome continues functioning. That's the important part. Civilization often survives not because everything is perfect, but because enough ordinary people keep doing ordinary jobs. Someone repairs roads, someone cleans fountains, someone records taxes, someone inspects grain shipments arriving from North Africa, someone complains about politicians. That last profession appears wonderfully immortal. The emperor, meanwhile, has learned an important lesson. Trying to rule absolutely without listening to anyone usually ends with either poison or a very sharp knife. Roman history offers an impressive number of examples. Enough that becoming emperor almost looks like accepting a very dangerous office internship. So instead of centralizing everything, this wiser government gives local regions greater autonomy. Germanic leaders become respected Roman governors instead of hostile outsiders. Families that once threatened invasion now receive titles, land, citizenship, marriage alliances. Rome had always been surprisingly good at absorbing people. Earlier emperors had been born in Spain, Africa, the Balkans, Syria. Being Roman gradually became less about ancestry and more about participation. That's one reason the empire lasted as long as it did in reality. Citizenship became flexible. Identity became political rather than purely ethnic. In our alternate world, that process simply continues. A Frankish noble might proudly call himself Roman, A Goth commands Roman cavalry. A Saxon studies Roman law. None of this would have seemed especially strange, because Rome had spent centuries turning outsiders into insiders, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes after a few unpleasant wars, but eventually they usually joined. The roads remain the empire's greatest achievement. People often imagine Roman roads as impressive tourist attractions. In truth, they were economic miracles. Thousands upon thousands of kilometers connected farms to towns, towns to cities, cities to ports, ports to entire continents. Merchants travel farther, ideas travel faster. Doctors exchange medical knowledge. Teachers move between provinces. Books circulate more efficiently. News spreads quickly enough that an emperor actually learns about distant problems before they've become catastrophes. Usually. Unless someone forgets to deliver the paperwork. Again, there is always paperwork. Without political collapse, education changes too. Libraries remain funded. Schools continue operating. Greek philosophy stays widely available in Western Europe instead of surviving mainly through monasteries. Children of wealthy merchants study mathematics alongside rhetoric. Engineers refine concrete formulas that historians in our timeline eventually lost. Imagine Roman architects continuing uninterrupted research for another 1,000 years. Their domes become larger, bridges stronger, harbors deeper, water systems more sophisticated. Innovation often happens not through sudden genius, but through generations quietly improving old ideas. Rome was remarkably good at improving things, perhaps not inventing everything first, but making systems practical, reliable, repeatable, rather like the world's largest engineering department. With slightly better sandals. Religion presents another fascinating question. Christianity continues spreading. The emperor remains Christian. Churches grow across the empire. Yet because political authority stays stable, theological disagreements produce fewer permanent divisions. The great schism between Eastern and Western Christianity may never happen. Latin and Greek churches remain connected, not perfectly. Families rarely agree on everything forever, but connected enough to avoid centuries of hostility. Pilgrims travel freely. Scholars exchange manuscripts. Monks copy books from Alexandria, Antioch, Rome, and Constantinople without worrying about competing political worlds. Knowledge survives more continuously, not because people become smarter, because institutions remain stable. Sometimes history's greatest invention isn't technology, it's simply continuity. Now imagine being an ordinary farmer, not an emperor, not a senator, just someone whose biggest concern is whether enough rain falls this season. Life remains difficult. History rarely grants peasants luxurious lifestyles. Your hands ache, your back hurts. Taxes still exist. Of course they do. This is Rome. Taxes are practically a constitutional principle, but your roads are safer, markets more reliable, law courts function consistently, bandits are fewer, harvests can reach distant cities. Economic stability quietly improves millions of lives, not dramatically, just steadily. And steady improvements often shape civilization more than spectacular victories. As the 6th century unfolds, something remarkable begins happening. People stop asking whether Rome will survive. Instead, they assume it always will. Children grow up believing the empire has existed forever. Their grandparents believed the same thing. Their great-grandparents agreed. The idea of Europe breaking into dozens of competing kingdoms starts sounding almost absurd. Why would anyone want 20 different currencies when one already works? Why invent entirely new legal systems when Roman law already covers nearly everything? Why build isolated little kingdoms when you're already part of history's largest administrative machine? Sometimes the most revolutionary idea is simply keeping something that already functions. And as the sun slowly rises over marble temples, Christian churches, crowded marketplaces, and the endless roads stretching toward every horizon, the Roman Empire enters another century, not with fanfare, not with triumph, but quietly, patiently, almost sleepily, as though it fully intends to last forever. The funny thing about living inside an empire that never collapses is that people stop noticing how extraordinary it is. Imagine being born around the year 650 in our alternate Roman world. Your grandparents remember an emperor. Your parents remember an emperor. You assume your grandchildren will also complain about an emperor. Because complaining about the government, thankfully, seems to be one of humanity's oldest uninterrupted traditions. You probably don't think of yourself as living in history. You're simply trying to buy fresh bread before someone else gets the good loaf. You're hoping your roof doesn't leak during the winter rains. You're wondering whether your neighbor really needed another donkey. Spoiler alert, he absolutely believed he did. History often focuses on emperors, but civilizations survive because millions of ordinary people quietly repeat ordinary routines. The baker wakes before sunrise. The fisherman repairs his nets. The potter shapes another 100 bowls. The tax collector appears exactly when nobody wants him to. Some occupations truly are eternal. By the 7th century, Rome has learned something important. Conquering land is expensive. Keeping it is even more expensive. So the empire changes its priorities. Instead of launching endless campaigns across distant frontiers, emperors invest heavily in strengthening what they already possess. Border fortresses become more sophisticated. Watchtowers communicate using smoke during daylight, and carefully arranged beacon fires at night. Military roads receive constant maintenance. Local governors are expected to solve small problems before they become expensive disasters. It isn't glamorous. Nobody writes epic poems about improved road inspections. But surprisingly often, road inspections win more wars than dramatic speeches. The Roman army changes as well. Gone are the days when every problem is solved by marching thousands of heavily armored infantry straight toward it. Military commanders adapt. Horse archers become more common. Light cavalry patrol enormous frontiers. Engineers remain the pride of every legion. Roman soldiers still build forts almost as quickly as they fight. If there is one thing Rome never loses, it is its deep affection for organized construction projects. An enemy army sees a hill. A Roman engineer sees next Tuesday's fortress. The empire also becomes remarkably multicultural. Latin remains the official administrative language across much of the West. Greek continues flourishing in the East, but dozens of regional languages survive comfortably alongside them. Walk through a marketplace in Alexandria, and you'll hear Greek merchants bargaining with Egyptian farmers. Visit southern Gaul and Latin mixes with older Celtic dialects. Travel to Hispania, and local accents immediately reveal where someone grew up. Rome slowly realizes something modern governments eventually learn as well. People usually become more loyal when nobody insists they abandon everything familiar. You can speak your own language, celebrate local festivals, cook family recipes, wear traditional clothing. Just remember to pay your taxes. Some principles remain delightfully non-negotiable. Education continues improving. Schools no longer serve only aristocratic families. Successful merchants begin sending children to study reading, mathematics, engineering, philosophy, and law. Libraries expand rather than disappear. Ancient works never become forgotten treasures, waiting centuries to be rediscovered. Instead, Aristotle, Euclid, Galen, Cicero, and countless others remain ordinary classroom material. Generation after generation adds careful notes into manuscripts. Imagine opening a copy of Plato containing 500 years of continuous scholarly commentary, every margin filled by teachers who politely disagree with someone who politely disagreed with another teacher 2 centuries earlier. Academics have always possessed remarkable stamina when it comes to arguing. Thankfully, most of those arguments involve books rather than swords. Printing has still not been invented, so books remain precious. Teams of scribes work patiently under soft afternoon light. Each letter receives careful attention. Ink dries slowly. Mistakes require painstaking correction. A beautifully copied manuscript may take months to complete. Yet because the empire remains wealthy, copying centers become increasingly organized. Some resemble quiet factories of knowledge. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling. Fresh parchment arrives daily. Scholars compare different versions of texts to remove copying errors. History is preserved almost accidentally through endless careful repetition. One monk copies yesterday's philosopher, another copies the monk, another copies both. Sometimes civilization survives because someone simply had neat handwriting. Medicine progresses slowly but steadily. Roman physicians still cannot cure many diseases. No alternate timeline magically invents antibiotics overnight. But hospitals become larger. Medical schools exchange observations throughout the empire. Doctors begin keeping more systematic records. One physician notices certain treatments repeatedly fail. Another discovers that washing surgical tools reduces infection, even if nobody fully understands why. Progress arrives quietly, not through miracles, through patient observation. History rarely rewards patience with exciting stories, but medicine certainly does. Meanwhile, the cities continue growing. Rome remains magnificent. Constantinople shines across the Bosporus. Carthage flourishes again as a center of trade. Lugdunum, Londinium, Antioch, Ravenna, Alexandria, and countless other cities become linked by reliable commerce. Ships cross the Mediterranean almost daily. Grain from Egypt, olive oil from Hispania, wine from Gaul, glass from Syria, marble from Greece. Silk arrives from farther east through complicated trading networks involving people who probably have very different opinions about pricing. Merchants have always believed every customer should pay just a little more. Customers naturally disagree. Some debates truly never age. Let's drift for a moment into an ordinary Roman harbor. The air smells of salt, fresh fish, wood, tar, and perhaps a suspicious amount of garlic. Dock workers unload cargo while shouting instructions that somehow everyone understands despite the apparent chaos. Children weave between carts. Dogs inspect absolutely everything. A customs official carefully records every shipment because Rome trusts many people, but paperwork trusts no one. A merchant sighs dramatically while calculating import duties. Another quietly wonders whether declaring only 90 barrels instead of 100 might go unnoticed. It will not. There is always another official checking the first official. The Roman Empire practically industrializes bureaucracy. Oddly enough, it works. Without the collapse of Western administration, Northern Europe develops differently. Britain remains connected to continental trade. Roman towns continue expanding. Stone roads receive maintenance, generation after generation. Large public baths still operate. Urban life never retreats as dramatically as it did in our own timeline. That changes everything. Cities create demand. Demand creates markets. Markets encourage innovation. Innovation attracts skilled workers. Those workers create better tools. Better tools produce more food. More food supports larger cities. Civilization at its best becomes one enormous circle helping itself continue. Of course, this doesn't mean life becomes perfect. Far from it. Corruption still exists. Ambitious governors occasionally enrich themselves. Some emperors remain spectacularly incompetent. History insists upon maintaining a healthy supply of terrible leaders. One emperor spends outrageous sums decorating palaces while ignoring damaged aqueducts. Another constantly reorganizes provincial boundaries because he enjoys drawing maps more than governing people. Yet strong institutions prevent individual mistakes from becoming national disasters. A foolish emperor eventually dies, usually of natural causes. Occasionally, after discovering that palace politics remain surprisingly energetic, but the administration survives. Records remain. Roads remain. Courts remain. The empire simply appoints another ruler and carries on. For ordinary citizens, continuity matters far more than perfection. As evening settles across the empire, oil lamps begin glowing inside homes from Britannia to Egypt. Families gather for supper. Children practice reading aloud. An elderly grandfather tells stories about Julius Caesar, as though the great general had only recently departed. Historical memory feels astonishingly close. Rome has existed for centuries already. Its oldest monuments seem almost eternal. Few people imagine they might someday disappear. Why would they? The empire survived famines, civil wars, plagues, political intrigue, barbarian invasions, economic crises. Surely it can survive tomorrow as well. That quiet confidence slowly shapes an entire civilization. Not arrogance, just familiarity, like the sunrise or the changing seasons. Rome is simply there, permanent, steady, reliable. At least, that's what everyone believes as another peaceful night settles across the world's greatest empire. And for now, they have every reason to believe it. By now, our Roman Empire has become something rather unusual. Not invincible, not perfect, simply dependable. For generations, children have grown up, assuming there will always be an emperor somewhere, senators arguing somewhere else, and at least 3 officials insisting that one more document must be completed before anything interesting can happen. Empires usually rise, then they fall. Ours seems to have misplaced the second half of that plan. And somewhere around the early 7th century, the rest of the world begins changing in ways no emperor, no matter how experienced, could fully predict. Because history never really stops moving. Even if Rome does its very best to keep everything neatly organized. Far to the south, beyond the familiar provinces of Egypt and Syria, merchants crossing the Arabian deserts begin carrying more than spices and incense. They carry ideas, religious beliefs, poetry, news from distant tribes, stories told around campfires beneath skies so clear that every constellation appears close enough to touch. Long before armies arrive, Ideas usually travel first. They cost less, they move faster, and unlike soldiers, ideas rarely complain about the weather. In our own timeline, the rise of Islam transformed enormous parts of the ancient world with astonishing speed. Within decades, territories that had belonged to the Byzantine and Persian empires became part of a rapidly expanding Islamic civilization. It was one of history's most remarkable political and cultural transformations. But tonight, our story drifts along a gentler path. Because this Rome is stronger, its eastern provinces remain well supplied, its forts are maintained, its governors are more competent than many of their historical counterparts. The empire isn't asleep this time. It notices the changing world. That doesn't mean conflict disappears. Far from it. Borders remain complicated places. Caravans occasionally arrive carrying worried rumors. A frontier commander receives reports from scouts. Merchants mention unfamiliar political alliances. Local officials quietly increase patrols. The emperor receives long reports filled with maps, grain estimates, military inventories, and enough statistics to make modern accountants feel strangely emotional. Some things never change. Governments absolutely adore reports. Whether anyone actually reads all of them, that remains another question entirely. Instead of collapsing under sudden pressure, Rome chooses diplomacy alongside defense. Envoys travel south. Arab merchants visit Roman ports. Religious scholars begin debating each other in remarkably polite language. Most of the time, every civilization likes to imagine its philosophers are perfectly calm. History gently suggests otherwise. Academics have been finding sophisticated ways to argue for thousands of years. Fortunately, arguments with books tend to produce better outcomes than arguments with swords. Trade continues flowing, perhaps even more than before. Ships cross the eastern Mediterranean, carrying olive oil, grain, textiles, glass, spices, perfumes, paper, and knowledge. Ideas become another valuable cargo. Roman scholars become fascinated by advances in astronomy, developing farther east. Arab mathematicians study Greek philosophical works preserved in Roman libraries. Medical texts travel in both directions. Nobody realizes it yet, but they are quietly building one of humanity's greatest exchanges of knowledge. Sometimes civilizations become stronger, not by defeating one another, but by becoming curious. Curiosity is surprisingly difficult to conquer. Imagine walking through Alexandria during this peaceful exchange. Morning sunlight reflects across the harbor. Fishing boats gently rock beside massive merchant ships. Street vendors prepare warm flatbread, while nearby scholars debate geometry over breakfast, which sounds exhausting before coffee. Thankfully, the Romans have become enthusiastic coffee drinkers much earlier than history originally allowed. Well, Perhaps not coffee just yet. Let's not cheat too much. For now, they'll have to survive on wine diluted with water, a choice that somehow seemed perfectly reasonable for centuries. Inside Alexandria's great library district, never entirely destroyed in this alternate history, rows of scholars quietly compare manuscripts. One table examines Roman engineering manuals. Another studies Indian mathematics recently translated into Greek. Nearby, a physician copies medical observations sent from physicians practicing near Damascus. Across the room, someone patiently argues over whether Aristotle intended one particular sentence to mean exactly what everyone has spent 200 years arguing about. The answer, predictably, remains unclear. Some scholarly traditions possess astonishing endurance. The emperor encourages these exchanges, not entirely from kindness. Knowledge creates stronger engineers. Better engineers build stronger bridges. Stronger bridges support larger armies. Larger armies discourage invasions. Everything, eventually, circles back to infrastructure. Roman logic rarely wandered far from practical concerns. Even philosophy eventually had to justify itself through administration. The empire also becomes wealthier than ever before. Without repeated political collapse, long-distance commerce becomes almost routine. A merchant born in Londinium can invest in ships sailing from Alexandria. A banker in Ravenna finances vineyards in Hispania. Glassmakers in Syria receive orders from Britain. Textiles woven in Egypt appear in marketplaces across Gaul. The Mediterranean no longer feels like the edge of separate kingdoms. It feels like one enormous inland highway. The Romans once called it Mare Nostrum, our sea. In this timeline, it truly earns that name. Life for ordinary citizens slowly improves. Not dramatically. History almost never changes overnight, but steadily. Roads become smoother, bridges stronger, harvests more predictable. Public sanitation improves city health. Engineers design better water systems using centuries of accumulated experience. Roman concrete continues evolving. Architects experiment with lighter domes, larger windows, improved drainage. Buildings last longer because each generation quietly fixes the mistakes of the previous one. Civilizations age much more gracefully when nobody interrupts the maintenance schedule. It turns out replacing broken roof tiles every few years is considerably cheaper than rebuilding the entire city. Who could have guessed? Roman engineers. They definitely guessed. Education slowly spreads beyond the wealthy. Talented children from merchant families receive scholarships funded by prosperous cities. Local councils compete to establish respected schools. Teachers travel enormous distances, carrying handwritten notes and treasured manuscripts carefully wrapped against rain. Learning becomes prestigious, not merely fashionable. Parents proudly announce that their daughter studies mathematics, or their son has become a physician, or perhaps their niece has mastered several languages while translating philosophical texts. Knowledge gradually becomes another form of wealth, one impossible to steal quite so easily. Meanwhile, somewhere along the Rhine frontier, an elderly Roman veteran sits outside his small farmhouse, watching grandchildren chase chickens. Again, the chickens remain deeply opposed to this arrangement. The old soldier smiles. He remembers serving on the frontier 40 years earlier. Back then, everyone predicted disaster. The empire won't last another decade. The treasury is empty. The borders are collapsing. The emperor has no idea what he's doing. Remarkably familiar complaints. People have predicted Rome's imminent downfall for generations. Yet here it still stands. Sometimes the loudest forecasts age the worst. Of course, challenges continue arriving. Climate shifts affect harvests. Disease occasionally sweeps through crowded cities. Local rebellions still occur. Politics remains wonderfully complicated. One ambitious governor believes he deserves the imperial throne. Another senator believes absolutely everyone except himself is incompetent. Neither opinion surprises anyone. Power has always attracted confidence. Occasionally more confidence than ability. Fortunately, the empire's institutions remain stronger than individual ambitions. When one official fails, another quietly replaces him. Records continue. Courts continue. Road crews continue repairing highways. Tax collectors continue inspiring universal disappointment. Life goes on. As another century unfolds, something remarkable becomes increasingly clear. Rome is no longer merely surviving. It is becoming the meeting place of civilizations. Greek philosophy, Roman law, Christian theology, Arab astronomy, Indian mathematics, Persian craftsmanship, Egyptian medicine, all flowing through one vast network, connected by roads, ports, libraries, and markets. History often celebrates conquerors, but perhaps builders leave the deeper legacy. A bridge rarely receives the same admiration as a victorious general. Yet bridges usually outlive generals, quite comfortably in fact. Night slowly settles once again across the empire. Oil lamps flicker inside homes from the misty hills of Britannia to the warm shores of Egypt. Ships gently sway in quiet harbors. Monks copy manuscripts beneath candlelight. Merchants finish calculating tomorrow's prices. Children drift to sleep while grandparents tell stories of Caesar, Augustus, Constantine, and dozens of emperors whose names have blended into the long rhythm of Roman history. The empire has become something almost impossible to imagine. Not eternal. Nothing truly is. But patient, flexible, always adjusting, always repairing, always preparing for another sunrise. And somewhere, Deep inside an imperial archive filled with shelves of carefully labeled scrolls, a weary clerk ties one final ribbon around yet another stack of tax records. He sighs, blows out his lamp, and unknowingly plays his tiny part in keeping Rome alive for just one more ordinary day. By now, several centuries have passed since the moment history was supposed to change forever. Except, it didn't. No great collapse arrived in the West. No long interruption fractured the institutions that had quietly held together one of history's largest civilizations. The Roman Empire simply continued. One generation replaced another. One emperor followed the last. One harvest gave way to the next. If you asked an ordinary citizen whether they were living through an extraordinary age, they would probably shrug. I still have taxes. My roof still leaks. My neighbor's rooster still starts shouting before sunrise. Some experiences truly unite humanity across the centuries. Historians in our own timeline speak about the Renaissance as a rebirth. The word itself comes from the idea that Europe rediscovered many classical Greek and Roman ideas after centuries in which they had become less widely available in Western Europe. But in our alternate world, there is no rebirth, because nothing was forgotten. The books never vanished from the libraries. The engineering manuals never gathered centuries of dust. Roman law never stopped being taught. Ancient philosophy never became a forgotten treasure waiting to be rediscovered. Instead, learning grows like an old oak tree, slowly, patiently, adding one new ring every year. No dramatic awakening, just steady progress. Imagine visiting Rome around the year 900. The city feels ancient, not abandoned. Ancient in the comforting way an old family home feels ancient. Every generation has repaired something, added something, expanded something. The Forum remains busy, though many buildings have been renovated countless times. New churches stand beside temples that have found fresh purposes. Old statues still decorate public squares. Children climb on monuments that are already nearly 1,000 years old. To them, these marble giants have always been there, like mountains or rivers. Nobody stops to admire them every day. Familiar beauty quietly fades into the background. The universities have become the true heart of the empire, not just one or two, dozens. Rome, Alexandria, Athens, Carthage, Constantinople, Massilia, Londinium. Each develops its own specialties. Students travel enormous distances, carrying satchels filled with carefully copied books. Some spend months crossing the empire just to hear a famous mathematician explain geometry. Others journey to study medicine under celebrated physicians. A few attend philosophy lectures that somehow last longer than anyone thought human attention could possibly survive. University students, it seems, have always been experts at pretending not to fall asleep. Inside one lecture hall, An elderly professor slowly explains Aristotle. Again, he has been explaining Aristotle for nearly 40 years. His students politely nod. Several secretly wish he would explain lunch instead. Yet among them sits a curious young engineer. She listens carefully, not because she wants to become a philosopher, because she believes Aristotle made one small mistake, and she has an experiment that might prove it. This is how science often moves forward, not through loud revolutions, through polite disagreement. The Roman government, surprisingly, encourages practical experimentation. Engineers receive funding. Architects compete for prestigious public projects. Water management remains almost a national obsession. Every growing city requires cleaner water, better drainage, more reliable aqueducts, improved bridges. Each challenge inspires new solutions. One engineer designs stronger arches. Another develops lighter lifting cranes. Someone else creates improved gears for grain mills. None of these inventions seem world-changing on their own. Together, they quietly reshape civilization. Mechanical knowledge expands century after century. Water wheels become increasingly sophisticated. Windmills appear across northern provinces. Metalworking improves. Clockmakers build increasingly accurate timepieces. Large public clocks begin appearing in major cities. Not because everyone suddenly becomes obsessed with punctuality, although Roman officials certainly appreciate punctuality, mostly because merchants enjoy knowing precisely when markets open, and judges enjoy knowing exactly how late everyone has arrived. Justice, after all, appreciates good timing. Let's wander into a Roman workshop. The smell of hot iron fills the air. Wood shavings cover the floor. Sunlight filters through narrow windows. An apprentice carefully files the teeth of a bronze gear. His master quietly inspects a complicated machine powered by flowing water. Nearby, another craftsman sketches improvements onto wax tablets. Nothing here looks particularly dramatic. Nobody realizes these small improvements will eventually transform agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation. History often changes inside quiet workshops. Not only on battlefields, books also begin changing. For centuries, scribes patiently copied every manuscript by hand. Beautiful work, slow work, expensive work. Now inventive craftsmen search for faster methods. Woodblock printing appears first. Individual carved pages, useful but cumbersome. Soon someone asks an obvious question. What if every letter could be moved separately? Simple questions occasionally produce enormous consequences. After years of trial and error, movable type begins spreading across the empire. Books become cheaper. Libraries expand rapidly. Knowledge travels faster than ever before. Teachers celebrate, students less enthusiastically, because suddenly there are far more books to read. Education has always possessed this unfortunate side effect. The empire grows increasingly literate. Merchants keep better records. Farmers learn basic arithmetic. Ship captains study navigation. Even ordinary artisans begin owning small collections of books. Parents teach children to read not because it is fashionable, because it is useful. Civilization quietly becomes smarter, not through genius, through access. Across the Mediterranean, trade flourishes beyond anything earlier generations imagined. Roman ships now venture farther into the Atlantic. Experienced sailors hug unfamiliar coastlines. Maps improve. Compass technology, learned through contact with Eastern civilizations, spreads throughout imperial navigation. Harbors become crowded with vessels carrying goods from every direction. The empire no longer looks only inward. It begins looking toward distant horizons. Curiosity slowly replaces caution. Not every voyage succeeds. Some captains misjudge storms. Others discover that maps remain optimistic works of imagination. One navigator confidently reports an island that nobody else ever finds again. His rivals politely suggest he may have mistaken a cloud for solid land. The debate continues for decades. Sailors, much like fishermen, occasionally tell stories that become slightly larger with each retelling. Meanwhile, life in the countryside changes more slowly. A farmer in Gaul still wakes before dawn. She still checks the weather with remarkable accuracy, still worries about rainfall, still complains about weeds that somehow grow faster than wheat. Agricultural tools, however, improve steadily. Iron plows become stronger. Water-powered mills save countless hours of labor. Better crop rotation increases harvests. People eat more reliably. Population slowly grows. Children survive infancy more often than previous generations. Quiet improvements seldom inspire epic poetry, yet they transform millions of lives. The empire's greatest strength is no longer its army. Although the legions remain disciplined, its greatest strength has become its network. Roads, libraries, universities, ports, workshops, courts, markets. Information travels across this web almost as efficiently as goods. A physician in Antioch publishes observations. Months later, doctors in Britannia discuss them. An engineer in Hispania designs a better bridge. Within a few years, similar bridges appear thousands of miles away. Innovation no longer remains local. It becomes imperial. As evening settles over Rome once more, lamps glow inside crowded neighborhoods. Students quietly copy lecture notes. Inventors make one final adjustment to an unfinished machine. A librarian carefully places another newly printed volume onto a growing shelf. Outside, children chase one another through ancient streets lined with buildings that have stood for centuries. To them, Rome has always existed. It always will. At least, that is what they believe. And perhaps that quiet confidence is the empire's greatest achievement of all. Not the monuments, not the armies, not even the laws, but the simple belief that tomorrow will arrive much like today, peacefully, orderly, with fresh bread in the markets, water flowing through the aqueducts, and somewhere, inevitably, another government official asking for one more completed form before the day is done. By the beginning of the 12th century in our imagined timeline, the Roman Empire has become something that would seem almost unbelievable to people living in our own history. It has not conquered the entire world. No empire ever truly does. It has not eliminated wars. Human beings remain wonderfully talented at disagreeing with one another. Instead, Rome has done something much rarer. It has stayed organized, generation after generation, century after century. Its greatest victories are no longer measured by new provinces painted on maps. They are measured by roads that still function after 500 years, by bridges that refuse to collapse, by libraries whose shelves become heavier every decade, and by citizens who assume tomorrow will look reassuringly similar to today. Stability is surprisingly exciting, at least if you're an accountant. Fortunately for Rome, it has never suffered from a shortage of accountants. As Europe, North Africa, and the Near East continue prospering together, curiosity slowly pushes beyond familiar coastlines. Merchants begin asking increasingly annoying questions. What's beyond that horizon? Can we trade with whoever lives there? And more importantly, will they buy our olive oil? Trade has always begun with curiosity. It usually ends with someone trying to negotiate a better price. Roman shipbuilders spend decades refining their vessels. Hull designs improve. Sails become more efficient. Navigation instruments grow increasingly accurate. Experienced captains keep careful journals recording winds, currents, stars, and coastal landmarks. Young sailors study these journals before making their own voyages. Knowledge, once again, proves to be the empire's greatest cargo. One captain learns from another. One generation quietly improves the mistakes of the last. Nobody notices history changing. They're too busy repairing ropes. Let's wander into one of the great imperial shipyards. The rhythmic sound of hammers echoes through the morning air. Fresh-cut cedar fills the workshop with a pleasant, earthy scent. Master carpenters inspect enormous wooden beams. Young apprentices carefully shape planks that will someday cross oceans. Nearby, a mathematician argues with a shipbuilder about hull angles. Neither seems willing to surrender. The mathematician insists calculations prove his design superior. The shipbuilder calmly replies that calculations have never actually sailed through a storm. Both possess a point. Progress often happens somewhere between theory and experience. By now, Roman maps stretch farther than ever before. The coast of Western Africa has been explored in greater detail. Atlantic islands are carefully charted. Seasonal wind patterns become increasingly familiar. Imperial observatories help sailors improve celestial navigation. The stars, after all, belong to everyone. Unlike taxes, those remain firmly Roman. Eventually, someone proposes an ambitious idea. Perhaps there is another route across the Great Western Ocean. The suggestion seems absurd, dangerous, expensive. Naturally, this makes wealthy investors extremely interested. History repeatedly demonstrates that ambitious merchants possess remarkable optimism whenever someone else is doing the sailing. The emperor approves a modest expedition, not because he expects to discover another continent, because exploration itself creates knowledge, and knowledge usually pays excellent dividends. Eventually, a small fleet leaves the coast of Hispania. Families gather to watch. Children wave enthusiastically. Several older sailors quietly shake their heads. The ocean is too large. They'll never return. They've packed far too little cheese. Experienced travelers always worry about food, quite reasonably. Weeks pass, then months. The fleet disappears beyond the horizon. Storms arrive. Calm seas follow. The sailors navigate using stars that seem almost painfully bright above the endless Atlantic. They encounter whales larger than any creature most have ever imagined. Flying fish surprise everyone. Ocean currents carry them steadily westward. Life aboard remains repetitive. Repair sails. Check water barrels. Record observations. Repeat. Adventure, in reality, often contains astonishing amounts of maintenance. One quiet morning, a lookout notices birds. Not seabirds, different birds. Soon floating branches appear. Fresh vegetation drifts upon the waves. The captain smiles cautiously. Land cannot be far away. Several days later, dark shapes emerge from morning mist. Hills, forests, rivers, an entirely unfamiliar coastline. No triumphant music plays. Nobody dramatically plants a flag while delivering an unforgettable speech. The sailors simply stare, silently, trying to understand what they are seeing. Sometimes history's greatest moments arrive with very little noise. The Roman explorers step ashore carefully. They are not alone. Indigenous communities have lived here for countless generations. Families hunt, farm, trade, raise children, tell stories beneath unfamiliar constellations. Their history has unfolded independently for thousands of years. The newcomers quickly realize this land is not empty. It never was. That understanding changes everything. Fortunately, this Rome has spent centuries learning that cooperation often proves more profitable than conquest. The first meetings remain cautious. Gifts are exchanged. Simple words are learned. Curiosity slowly replaces suspicion. A Roman physician becomes fascinated by unfamiliar medicinal plants. Local hunters laugh gently at Roman attempts to track game through dense forests. Everyone discovers they have something to teach and something to learn. Trade begins almost immediately. Glass beads, metal tools, fine textiles, beautiful pottery. In return, Roman merchants encounter entirely new crops: maize, beans, squash, strange fruits unlike anything growing around the Mediterranean. Botanists become positively delighted. Chefs, slightly confused. Roman cooking has survived many centuries. Introducing unfamiliar ingredients requires patience. Not every experiment succeeds. One unfortunate cook somehow manages to overcook corn. His dinner guests politely compliment the effort. Friendship occasionally requires generosity. Back in Rome, news spreads astonishingly fast. The Senate debates new trade policies. Scholars eagerly examine maps. Artists attempt to paint landscapes they have never seen. Children dream of distant forests filled with unfamiliar animals. Books describing the voyage become bestsellers across the empire. Well, as much of a bestseller as handwritten books and early printed editions can become. Success looked slightly different before online reviews. The emperor issues an important decree. Exploration should continue, but peaceful diplomacy must remain the priority. Trade before conquest. Learning before domination. Not everyone agrees. Some ambitious governors dream of enormous new territories. Others warn that history contains enough examples of empires expanding faster than they can govern. The debate lasts for years, as political debates usually do. Fortunately, senators receive generous lunches during long discussions. Civilization occasionally advances because nobody wishes to skip dessert. Across the empire, ordinary citizens continue their familiar routines, barely aware that history has quietly expanded the known world. A baker in Gaul still wakes before sunrise. A fisherman in Egypt still repairs his nets. A librarian in Alexandria still carefully catalogues newly arrived books. Life rarely changes overnight, even after extraordinary discoveries. Instead, the extraordinary slowly becomes ordinary. Children born 50 years later simply grow up knowing there is another great continent across the Western Sea. To them, it has always been there. As twilight settles over the Mediterranean once again, merchant ships gently rock beside crowded harbors. Some prepare to sail east, others west, toward lands their grandparents never imagined. The stars appear one by one above calm waters. Sailors quietly study familiar constellations before another long voyage. Somewhere beyond the dark horizon lies an entire new world, not waiting to be discovered, merely waiting to be met. And the Roman Empire, after surviving nearly 2,000 years, quietly prepares for yet another chapter. Not through conquest, not through spectacle, but through the same steady habits that carried it across the centuries. Careful planning, patient curiosity, reliable roads, well-built ships, and, naturally, enough paperwork to document absolutely every barrel loaded before departure.